Hey everyone, I'm Johnny, producer of Asia, and welcome to today's panel discussion on 5G, the 5-year plan, and where the value is for telcos in the short to medium term. We have a great panel today with our speakers joining us from Thailand, Singapore, Australia, Cambodia, and Saudi Arabia. And the panel will be moderated by Russell Lundberg, who is the CTO of Bangkok Beach Telecom. For any questions, please post them in the Q&A icon that you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Russell, who will begin this panel discussion.
Thanks, Johnny, and welcome everyone to the 5G panel session here at Telecoms World Asia. I'm Russell Lundberg, the Chief Technology Officer for Bangkok Beach Telecom. We have speakers from around the region who are going to talk today about where 5G is going, what's the 5-year plan. Let me briefly introduce them. Start with Saad Sheikh, the Chief Architect for Saudi Telecom Company. Saad.
Good morning, folks. My name is Saad Sheikh, and I work as Chief Architect within Infrastructure Planning and Architecture Design team of STC. My main role is mainly to define the infrastructure all the way from the core to the edge. So principally, I am responsible to define the open and disaggregated vision of 5G. And this is what I will really like to talk about with the community. Yeah.
Thanks, Todd. Next up is Tayyub Sabir. He's the head of network planning and optimization for Cellcard in Cambodia.
Hi, everybody. I am Tayyub. So I'm in Cellcard for almost, in telecom, I am working almost for 20 plus years in every department of telecom. So I am now working in Cellcard, and I am responsible for network planning and optimization and quality of service. So we are also just planning for 5G networks. So we will discuss it later on.
Thanks, Tayyub. Next up is Ridwan Khan, the head of B2B solutions for DTAC, one of the mobile operators here in Thailand.
Hey, good afternoon from Bangkok. My name is Ridwan, and I look after the B2B product portfolio for DTAC. And as you can see on my background, I am also responsible to drive the B2B 5G business for DTAC.
Thanks, Tayyub. Next, we have Kun Navachai Kirakortkua he's the head of enterprise marketing management at Advanced Info Service, another operator in Thailand.
Thank you, Russell. I'm responsible for B2B marketing team AAS. Right now, AAS, we transform ourselves from mobile network operator to be the digital service provider. And 5G is one of our key initiatives that we would like to drive the 5G uses in businesses in Thailand. Nice to meet all of you.
Thanks. Thanks, Kun Navachai. Next is Jaime Diaz. He's the regional CTO in Asia Pacific for Vodafone, based in Singapore.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Jaime here. I lead the technology team for Vodafone Business in the region, and well, super excited to be here. I think the 5-year plan are full of new use cases. We have done a lot of experience within Vodafone over the last year, and I think 5G is going to be an enabler or many use cases that hopefully we are going to be discussing today here. Thanks, Russell.
Thanks, Jaime. Next up is Harvey Wright. He's the head of 5G with Optus in Australia. Harvey.
Hi, Russell, and hello, everyone. Yes, I look after the product development around 5G here at Optus in Australia. Interested in discussing some of the use cases and some of the trends that we're seeing in 5G here in Australia and globally.
Thanks, Harvey. I've had a chance to speak with all of you outside of this panel session, and I'd have to say my overall impression is that there's a tremendous amount of excitement in the industry for 5G, the various use cases, things related to 5G. Myself, I'd say I've been in mobile telecoms for more than 30 years now, And it's just never been as exciting as it is right now. There's just the tremendous opportunity associated with 5G, related technologies, the use cases, which we'll talk about today. Perhaps we'll also have a chance to talk about Open RAN just briefly, because it's very closely tied to changes in the business. I think I'll just go ahead and start with you, Harvey. What do you see as the near-term changes and high points associated with 5G in telecoms?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and maybe before I jump in, just a little bit about Optus. We are a full-service carrier here in Australia, offering fixed and mobile services as well as over-the-top content. We launched 5G in November last year, so we've had about a year now of experiencing 5G. And I think, what we're seeing in Australia and elsewhere at the moment, I think is the initial phase of 5G, the sort of the early stages of 5G development, which is all about initial rollout, initial deployment, and to be honest, a relatively narrow set of use cases. I think the technology that we've got out there in terms of non-standalone architecture predominantly, and the need for us to sort of scale up means that the use cases that we're seeing at the moment are not surprisingly dominated by smartphone. Obviously, with the release of the iPhone 12 just recently, I think that's going to herald a pretty significant change in uptake and adoption, with 5G going mass market in most developed markets around the world. In Australia as well, we've seen fixed wireless access as an early stage use case, predominantly as I'd say a sort of a copper line replacement technology. We're using 3500 megahertz spectrum here, so we're getting decent speeds on our fixed wireless access product, 200, 300, 400 megabits per second, which makes it quite a good broadband alternative for residential use. So I think like I say, we're in the sort of the early stages, but it's going to get very interesting. And I think the next 5 years, what you're going to see are a series of waves of transformational technology. Obviously, the move to standalone architecture, the emergence of things like edge compute, orchestration and slicing, and then obviously the continual evolution of the standards with R16 and 17 coming up. I think you're going to see a lot of additional functionality and a broadening of opportunity as it relates to 5G. So what is currently sort of an incremental evolution in connectivity, I think is going to get really exciting. I think the interesting thing for me about 5G, you talked about it being an interesting and dynamic time, and I agree. Yeah, two things. First, I think the fact that we're all, as operators, starting from slightly different starting points, different spectrum assets, different stages, different timing of deployment, means that I think 5G is going to be slightly different in different parts of the world. Areas where you've got millimeter wave, for example, available already, very high speed, very localized deployment is going to provide a flavor of 5G that's quite different to what you might find in other markets, for example. So I think the slightly staggered start you're going to see across different countries and different markets, I think is going to make it quite interesting. And then the second thing that I think is interesting is the broadening of innovation that I think will occur as a result of 5G. I think to begin with, like I say, quite incremental and an evolution of existing applications. But I think as soon as you start to see the ultra low latency capabilities of 5G available, as soon as you start to have some of these other technologies provide the sort of real-time compute at the edge, I think the industry could go in a variety of different ways. And for operators, it's all about picking your particular area of expertise. I don't think telcos in general can be all things to all customers. And so I think you're going to see a level of specialism by different operators in areas where they have strengths. So it's going to be an interesting time.
I agree, Harvey. Yeah, thanks. That's a really tremendous overview. You touched on many of the key points that I think we'll expand upon throughout the session today, especially that 5G is now becoming real, with over 100 operators have launched commercial services around the world. I think that, as you said, that's all in a non-standalone environment, which means the use case is primarily smartphones. People are getting slightly faster speeds. And what remains over the next year or two, I think, will be largely filling out the 5G coverage, and standalone will come maybe. I think there's a very small number of operators have begun limited deployments of standalone 5G networks, so that's very interesting to watch. I'm going to turn it over to Jaime from Vodafone. The use cases, as you mentioned, right now is primarily smartphone, but Jaime, what kind of use cases are you thinking of, or are Vodafone thinking of, will be applicable to 5G in the next little while?
Well, so I do agree that with Harvey that we are at the beginning of the 5G evolution or revolution, depending how you like to look at it. We launched 5G more than a year ago. We have it today live across Vodafone in our main markets, across more than 250 cities, really. And obviously during this time, we have been experiencing multiple use cases, from very exploratory co-creation use cases with some of our enterprise customers. For example, we did an experiment in Germany with a blind skier that was being guided through a camera on her helmet, and the guiding was actually done through a headphone, right? Rather than being face to face with a person, just to show the capacity and the interesting things around the low latency in that case. But we have deployed also, and we have announced a couple of use cases with Ford and Ego, a couple of car manufacturers, where we are helping them to build the manufacturing of the future, right? Obviously, the low latency, the added computing is going to help them to create new use cases. That I think the idea is that to discover some of them, and really is going to unveil new possibilities from a efficiency perspective, but also from a safety perspective, right? And I think that's the key thing, really, that we don't need to forget. 5G is going to come here to enable and help us as humans, right, at the end of the day.
I really like your example of the blind skier use case. It really humanizes the technology far better than I think telcos are often able to do. Kun Navachai, I'd like to ask you to say a little bit more about use cases. What are some of the use cases that AIS are thinking for the Thai market to come ahead?
Thank you. I agree with Hamis and Harvey that the first use case of 5G would be smartphone, the B2C one. But in Thailand, we just have the spectrum bidding early this year, and we just roll out our network throughout the 77 provinces, maybe in middle of this year. The first use case that we see beside of smartphone would be fixed wireless access. But in opposite of Optus in Australia, in Thailand, the first use case of fixed wireless access are in enterprises. In Thailand, there are many locations that we cannot wire the optical fiber cable in that location. And we use 5G to be the last mile access, to be the fixed wireless access for enterprises to access to the internet, to access for their virtual private network and so on. This is the first one that we encountered during the last few months. The next one, I think the early adopter of 5G in B2B sphere would be in automotive, as Kun Ames just mentioned as well. And in manufacturer, we experience a lot of requests to do the trial of 5G private network in the factories in the Eastern Economic Corridor area of Thailand. The case of Bosch, I think Bosch already deployed 5G in Germany, and right now they trial the 5G network here in Thailand as well, and so on. So the AR/VR would be one of the use cases that enterprises trial for the 5G as well. We test this with NTT Docomo for the AR for remote consultant from Japan because of COVID-19. The consultant cannot travel from Japan here to Thailand. So we use the AR and transmit by 5G to the consultant in Japan to provide some advice to Thai worker here in Thailand. That's the use case that we have encountered so far.
Okay, thank you. I noticed you mentioned several times the use cases for the enterprise market. Jaime also mentioned that. I'd like to ask Redwan, at DTAC, is the enterprise market interesting for you? And are there specific strategies or specific efforts that DTAC has in mind for the enterprise market in Thailand?
Yeah, thanks, Russell. Kun Navachai already shared, the ground situation in Thailand. Is really early days for 5G. It's more on creating the awareness and then kind of showcase different use cases to different target segment. And as you know, the 5G has 3 distinct categories, and in terms of URLC or MMTC and also FWA. These are very much specific to enterprises. And DTAC being part of Telenor Group, we are also rolling out 5G in Europe, in Nordic countries. So what we're trying to do is to kind of work with the group, with our experience in Nordic region, to kind of tie it with Thailand and see what are the things that we can do. And obviously, some of the industries will be on the forefront of 5G, like automotive, like manufacturing, like the ports. And the challenge right now is to kind of build the ecosystem, because the operators can go only so far. And then we need to rely on the wider ecosystem in terms of devices, in terms of application, SIs, and etc. So it's a two-way lane. In one stream we are kind of creating awareness, doing the POCs, engaging with the customers. And the other thing is also we are working very closely with the local ecosystem and try to kind of make them aware about the 5G opportunities and kind of retune their business model with these new opportunities, not only 5G but also some of the IoT use cases, so that it's not just on the telcos. So that we can also use the strengths of the wider ecosystem.
Okay, okay, thanks for that. You've mentioned the fixed wireless access use case, as have a couple of the other speakers. I'm going to turn to Tayyab with Cell Card. I wonder, is the FWA use case, does Cell Card think that has applications, perhaps maybe up country or even around some of the major cities of Cambodia?
Yeah, actually, in the first phase, because as everyone told us that this is the early phase of 5G and everyone is still looking what possible use cases could be in the near future. So we are putting FWA in our first rollout phase beside EMBB applications. So because there are certain areas and locations where it's not easy to go through microwaves or even through lease lines. So we are trying to do it through FWA, especially the commercial factory zones. And so we will try to develop that kind of infrastructure there to support the enterprise requirement through the FWA.
Okay, thanks for that. Another aspect that we've not yet got round to, and I wanted to ask Saad about this. Saad's the chief architect for STC. Saad, are there aspects of the network that are separate from the use cases, separate from the standalone versus non-standalone? Are there aspects of the network that are particularly important to the deployment and to the use cases? That was for Saad. Saad, your microphone may not be on.
Sorry, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Actually, I think till now, we are still in the high phase of 5G. And it is true that we have deployed in thousands of sites. I think in this current phase, our main intention was to understand customer like attraction to the 5G, to make it something real, to get some understanding of the market, how to brand it. I think this was the main focus at this time, to understand something about pricing or this. But I think the real use case, with most of the operators, we have been waiting for the URLCC and the 3GPP release 16, which is obviously now standardized. I think right now, what is the missing piece in the whole 5G story is, I think, as Ridwan was mentioning, it's about the ecosystem or the missing pieces. So actually, my team main focus is actually to fill in this, how to build a open 5G network, right? Because I think traditionally the guys coming from telecom need to see that what has happened to the whole RAN market. I think somehow we managed to squeeze the prices of the RAN boxes, but it come at the price of less innovation. So what has happened, we find a lot of difficulties to introduce or build a new use cases. I think the real use case of 5G is only one use case, which is to customize or build something which is not existing based on your own market requirements, and how to enable it. For sure, I think the vision we have been actually working during the last whole year, because we bring many vendors coming with their CRAN or cloud RAN solutions. We actually try to understand and build a platform, for example, the specs, the models, which can go into the 5G site. And as we are a brownfield operator, another aspect we have been seeing how to build a synergy, because we need to see how this cloud wave is proceeding. You know, we find something on tracking from the NFV and cloud native. We see another road to the orchestration and automation. Then there are a couple of other things, how to use AI and ML. This is something we really need to see how to synergize it, right? So how we are seeing the real use cases of 5G, okay? An open platform, a fully disaggregated platform, both the RAN as well as the transport size, and open the RAN. For example, if you see the aspects of the open RAN itself, now it is no longer a requirement. This is a necessity. I give you some insights of our experience in 5G during the last 1 year. You know, at the mid band, if you need to put a coverage, right? So you need 10 times more sites compared to what is happening in the 4G. So it's very simple. Neither from the investment perspective, the current deployment model is okay for us. And the other question is about scale. You see, now I think we are ushering to an era of any service customer need now. Now the model of the traditional procurement where it's taking months to bring everything and then integration. It's no longer. So we have to do everything on the fly. And how we need to see RAN as an open box with an open API, which can be automated and programmable. And finally, we need to see another aspects. I think when we see the vision of the data, I think this is some piece which RAN is still, we are not able to understand traditionally in the 4G world. What is the real RAN, what is available there, which can really help us. I think this vision of platform pass is very important for the 5G to see how we can really use the data. We all know it's a regulated market, right? But we all know that there are ways to use this data in a regulated market. One aspect of 5G use case, because your question is, which we are actively exploring, right? How we can really convert our business model from the traditional telco or a pipe to in the first phase to become an open API connector. What is the definition of open API connector? Fully automate using same principle. Because you see, this cloud native movement has gained a real traction. We also are somehow aligning the vendors to match their RAN or give us the roadmaps to align to this vision. What is advantage for us? If we are building a cloud at the core, end-to-end, core, regional, edge, it can be just an application, you know. Once this is achieved, this means we can offer everything as an open API. Then the most important use case, which we are trying to hit now, is the vertical market. You just imagine there is an entertainment company, you know, who has some application and who want to come in. If somehow securing the boundaries of the secure data, we can offer them as a SaaS offering of our data to connect to us. To get this somehow is not happening. It's happening on the OSS and BSS, but this is a reality. I think this is the real point which will, as colleagues were saying, convert 5G into that innovation phase. So we need to focus more on the enablers, because otherwise I think hype will remain hype. for a long time, because the reality fact is this: we listen a lot of stories, this is a drone, this is that, but when we bring over wholesale enterprise guy, okay, go and sell it, it's a lot of difficulty, customers want it but don't want to pay it. So we need to take it in a way that will really makes a sense to bring value for everyone. So this is,
let me ask about
exactly
the innovation.
the
I think
yeah.
the innovation aspect of that is important, and you're really the first one to raise that. And you also talked, you used the term disaggregation, which for me is kind of a proxy for the whole discussion about Open RAN, which is a personal interest of mine, but that's not really the focus of this discussion. But I want to use that to ask Harvey, since he's leading that, the 5G deployment effort for Optus. Kunsad mentioned that it's a brownfield network, and since most networks today are brownfield networks, what do you think about how does that look? How does the transition look over the next several years while you're building out 5G coverage in a non-standalone environment? Is there a smooth transition for a standalone environment, and how does that affect the way you Optus are approaching this?
Yeah, look, it's a big question, isn't it? And I think I'd liken the sort of the transformation that we're going through at the moment like a network heart-lung transplant, right? You're basically transforming every aspect of the network. And I think what Zaid was saying before around changing the business model around the actual network, I think is also valid. And the other point I'd add though is, I think the actual deployment of the network itself is going to require very different models. If you start to talk about, vertical specific applications and configurations and private networks, for example, I think all of a sudden you're going to need a very pervasive and flexible network, which obviously comes at a cost. And I think the way in which the operator adapts and partners with specific users, predominantly I think enterprise users, is going to be critical. So the sales challenge that I think was mentioned there, absolutely. I think the way in which you productize and package up the network is going to be very different in the future. I think that the big question mark, and if that's 5 or maybe even 7 years into the future, the sort of the end game that's being described there, the transition is going to be the challenging part. How do you do that exercise in a smooth way? And I don't think it is going to be smooth. I think it's going to come in a fairly lumpy sort of fashion, with each phase requiring a slightly different approach. And unless you're a greenfields operator out there who can basically start from a clean slate, I think navigating that transition, including all the investment that needs to go with it, is going to be what defines success as an operator.
I like your use of the word lumpy there. It's often in conversations like this one, we kind of speak a little bit like whiteboard, where it's all, it's very general and, a broad-based approach, but, your use of the word lumpy is much more practical and facts on the ground, because it is lumpy. It is going to be very unevenly distributed. The major cities are likely to get the 5G coverage first, and, upcountry will get that much later. The actual implementation, and I'm still thinking about the word that Saad used, was disaggregation. That's a very key feature, but there's another feature that's important to enable an edge environment, which is really going to be, I think, crucial to the widespread deployment, and crucial to as a stepping stone to standalone 5G. I'm going to ask Jaime, the other component of the edge that enables these sophisticated use cases is the separation of the control plane and the user plane, so that you can peel data out from a distributed RAN and send it directly to the internet or to mobile, to MEC, mobile edge compute sites. How does that play in the edge computing? What role do you think that will play, and how will we achieve a widely distributed mobile edge architecture?
Yeah, so that's a very good point, Russell. So I think the way we should be looking at 5G is an enabler, right? 5G by itself is not going to magically change things, right? I think it's the combination of the multiple ingredients, right? 5G is one of them, definitely. Mobile or multi-access edge is definitely another one. IoT, another one. And the combination of those three with fixed network is what is definitely going to enable majority of the use cases and the majority of the value that is going to be there, right? So I think, I mean, any business leader from the audience watching this today should be asking himself about what are those 5G use cases that are potentially going to enable in their industry. How is that going to impact your business? And really identify who is the partner that can help you to navigate all this complexity. That's a long introduction to the specific question around edge. Russell, we have announced a partnership with AWS in Europe with Wavelength, because we definitely believe that there is 5G by itself is not just the solution, it's just one of the ingredients, really. So I think that combination is what is going to drive the value. We believe there are different scenarios, so you can have edge dedicated into the specific site, as we have announced with Ford, for example. But you can have also distributed edge, which is not as close to the customer, but can enable all their use cases in the same region. So I think, yeah, I think 5G by itself is just one of the ingredients. You need to have the full story. You need to combine with edge computing, IoT, and fixed networks.
I think the edge computing part is a real enabler. It's a very key enabler for some of the more exciting use cases. Kun Navachai, Jaime just mentioned the IoT and how that plays in with the edge. How are Advanced Info AIS seeing IoT in Thailand? Is that a big opportunity, do you think, in Thailand? And will there be edge cases that will be applied there?
I totally agree with Kun Jaime that 5G is just one of enablers. The edge computing, the IoT use cases, so on and so forth. We need to combine all together and create the use cases that we can benefit the most from these technologies. In Thailand, luckily, we have the government project we call Eastern Economic Corridor that we aim to develop the eastern part of Thailand, which previously have been a lot of factories there, a lot of investment for manufacturer there. And right now we invest to expand our infrastructure there, seaport, airports, so on and so forth. Luckily, we have a case that we just try out the 5G with edge computing and IoT solution in the seaport in the Eastern Economic Corridor here, there. We experienced that the implementation of edge computing together with 5G are very critical, because of the case that we try with the seaport there is about the remote controlling crane. It's about the crane. And the port would like to have the remote controller from the centralized control system to remotely control the crane at the seaport. And they need very low latency there. Very low latency there, about 6 milliseconds. 5G alone cannot serve that use case. We need to implement edge computing there. And this is a good chance for telco like us that we can learn how to implement 5G, this aggregation of network planes, so on and so forth, with our edge computing infrastructure. More luckily, we also have a partner that would like to invest and try for the edge computing there with us. So we not alone. I think we can partner with the vendor of edge computing, the network infrastructure system, and all together. I think the most important is the use case from enterprise customer. Without the use case, I think that we cannot test our 5G network, test our edge computing infrastructure. So I think that the role of telcos, we need to encourage our ecosystem to place more and more use cases, and we will learn more and more how to implement this together.
Thanks for that, Kunnavachai. It keeps coming up that the enterprise customer is important to 5G, perhaps more important than enterprise has ever been in the mobile business. Redwan, I wanted to ask you, in an enterprise environment, it seems that often to come up that there's a private network opportunity. What do you think is the interaction there? Is the enterprise going to be a mobile customer, or will the enterprise more likely to be a private network and a little bit separate from the traditional mobile network operator?
This is a good question, and I think, as Kunnavachai said, that 5G is when we talk about 5G, it's basically at least relating to 4G and 3G radio technology. But some of the application challenges like latency, like resiliency, and etc., that cannot be delivered over the radio as well. And obviously this needs to be augmented by private network, edge computing, and also in some cases you also need to come up with the SA core so that you can open up the APIs and etc. And there is no doubt, because 5G is pretty new in the town, but there are solid use cases of private network. Even if we go back to 10 years, we'll see that, the big companies, especially the, manufacturing and automotive sector, has been kind of, using private network over 4G. So it will be a kind of, natural extension of what we are offering to our enterprises along with the radio technology. There are also a few challenges as well, is that, these technologies, these are all good, that can deliver the performance, edge, and etc. But the challenging part is the business case for the operators and also for the customer, because the customer wants a gold-plated network, but they want to also save money from their existing baseline. And to make a good case for the customer, you need a good support from the device ecosystem, like all those end devices, screens, and etc. They need to come up. If you put 5G module, that needs to have achieve the economy of scale to make a good case for the customer. So I see the dilemma in the customer that 4G makes sense for them, but it's not future proof. But if they want to go for a future-proof solution like 5G edge computing, then there are a lot of additional cost of to kind of support the device stuff, and that's why I think some of the innovation and some of the efficiency in terms of reducing the cost of reducing the TCO for the customer is super important, like Open RAN, like having more and more ecosystem player coming up and working with 5G and achieve economies of scale in terms of devices, in terms of platforms. So I think this is a holistic problem, but at least from Thailand's point of view, the customers are educated. If you consider the there are a fair bit of MNCs in Thailand, so they understand the technology, they understand the need. The onus is on us, on the operators, and also the wider ecosystem, that how we make it cost effective for them so it's easier for them to adopt.
It's interesting what you say about the device ecosystem, especially in parts of Southeast Asia where some of the customers really need to have a device that's a little more affordable. Tayyab, can I ask you for CellCard? We've just recently had the announcement that of the 5G capable iPhone, but that's a very high-end device. Even down market from the iPhone, the devices for the 5G capable devices are still rather expensive. What do you think of the ecosystem of devices? What is that? Where does the price have to fall to, do you think, for that to have a much broader appeal among CellCard subscribers? What do you think of the overall device market?
Cambodia market is different when it comes to choosing which ecosystem the user want to go with, whether they want to go with Android or Apple. Most of the Cambodian people, and especially the teen, they want to go with Apple. So even in Cambodia, the more than 50% subscribers are using Apple iPhone, so Apple products. So they don't care about Android. But the problem with Apple is always lacking. in ecosystem when the new technologies are coming, even though they launch 5G, but their 5G, they're still using X50 processor from Qualcomm, which is very old generation. 2 years ago, they launched this one.
Mm.
Even the other Android phone manufacturer, they are using the latest chipsets. So that's a very setback for Apple, because even the old generation processor they are using, the throughput is very less. Yesterday, I tested the new iPhone with my 5G trial site. I was only getting in front of site, I was only getting around 200 Mbps data. But on the same time, when I tested the Vivo with the latest model X865 processor, Snapdragon, and I was getting 1.7 Gbps. So this is a huge difference. Even though Apple is saying, okay, they launched 5G, but they are still using the old chipset. And they are also controlling by themselves, okay, when to give 5G speed to user and when to give 4G speed. We don't have any choice in Apple right now. Even I was using Apple, I'm using this one Apple right now, the new one. So you can only see 4G. LTE, it's not even switching for me to the 5G, and they have their own preferences list for the operator. So if any operator which is not in their preferred list, maybe the 5G will never work for them, which is not the case with Android. So you bring any Android phone, 5G, it will just start working on your network, whether you are in their preferred list or not in preferred list. Obviously, there is a variation that, okay, how much good quality you are getting from that phone, that is another question. For example, because I have concern with the devices as well, because if I want to use Huawei network, but I want to use ZTE phone, sometimes they don't work because they're not opening up with each other. So IoT is a big concern between the vendors. IoT is a big concern between the operators, phone manufacturers and the RAN manufacturers, because sometimes they are not giving us IoT certification. If I have ZTE core network, but I want to use Huawei RAN network, whether they will work with each other or not. In some markets, they are working. But for in Cambodia market, if I am asking, okay, give me IoT before buying the equipment, they're not giving it to me. So although devices are keep on coming, but I'm not seeing any standardization right now, because they are keep on launching the phone, but they are not coordinating with the operators. Okay, guys, which frequency band you will use for your 5G, so that I can ship only that phone, or I can enable that feature in your market when I'm selling the phone here. But they are not doing this one right now. This is a big concern.
That's an interesting point, that it seems like in 5G, certainly more than I remember in any of the previous technologies, where compliance with the 3GPP standards seems to be a little, well, patchy. Saad, you had mentioned this when we spoke privately, that compliance was an issue. And as Tayyip mentions, not all devices user equipment works properly with different vendor cores or RAN. What do you see with STC on the device ecosystem and compliance? Is this going to be an issue, do you think?
I think Tayyip has explained well, but the issue, I think, even in the 3GPP, I want to explain it in two phases. One is the device or 3GPP view. Then another is this cloud and CNF and all these applications when we are talking, how this third party will work. When it comes to a device or traditional 3GPP, I think this is not new. I still remember back in the days of 2007-8 when we were bringing A over IP, for the RAN side. And because I was at the field, and I remember, even your R&D tell you that IoT is done. When we apply on the field, we find it's not working in the way. And then they ask us to, go to the lab and change some parameters, like let's say SCTP, and it's a big dictionary. So let's be very open. This is not an issue related to this 5G or new era. This is a traditional issue of multi-vendor. And the fact is this, within 3GPP, in the standard, I think there is a good definition about the standard, but a weak definition around the conformance. Conformance is something which is carrier scale, okay? So for us, how we are traditionally approaching, not just in 5G, I think on the device side, we have a very mature system. Even when we bring the VoLTE live, okay, so we have a complete certification program. We bring the handset vendors. For example, if you are launching Apple, you know how these things work. So I think, yes, this is the issue, but this is a well-crafted scenario. But the thing which is a mystery right now is on the cloud side. You know, I give you, because as you know, within the ITSINOC, within the CNCF, the CNTP program, and within the Linux Foundation, you watch, these are three of the initiatives where I have been, you know, actively focusing to bring not only just the whole community, you know, together to figure out and solve it. You know, I give you one example of the test platforms. You know, traditionally when we started our cloud journey, and everything is certified, like I have said, and we bring a third party, for example, a F5 load balancer, or we bring another, you know, from Ericsson or something. And you cannot believe the process is manual and it's based on Excel and clarification, and it took 6 months. Over time, because at that time, the fact is, even in the ITSI specs, you know, we know the Sol 5, the Sol 1, I think they were not hardened. Even the IFA standard was not. We have been, I think, all operators working and to figure out, this is a reality, it was not very hardened or mature. Now we are in phase 3. But the thing is this, now we reduce to 1 month, but now the challenge we are facing, we go to vendors, you know, I want a cloud which is a clone version. What is a clone? You know, just imagine a big country like in Saudi Arabia. I have 10 plus data centers. I will invest in this test or this inside one. In all other, it will be a clone. But it is not happening today, because even if you say the design of the vertical stack, you think it's not working. So there is a dire need to standardize this stuff up. Right now, what are the bigger challenges? You know, the first challenge is the definition of the architecture of this test platform and characteristics. Right now, all the big operators, they have a view that this is something very difficult to standardize, because somehow they are using some open source, some own tools, some mix. So we have come to a consensus to make a functional block, okay, and with the preference of the open source. And in other words, we want a common view among the all community, okay, to make it work.
You've used a term there a couple of times that no one else has brought up today, and that is open source. I'm just going to very quickly, so that everybody gets a chance to participate in the little time we have left. Harvey, what do you think the role of open source is going to be in the Optus 5G network?
Sorry, just let me come off mute there. So look, I think, you know, open source, I think, is one of a number of key transformations, and I think what we haven't talked about also is the economics of 5G. I think we're talking about massive investment, massive transformation, all of these use cases. I think someone mentioned before the need to sort of make the business case work, and I think you know, the notion of sort of open source, open RAN, I think plays a critical role in rethinking the overall economics of you know, network infrastructure in general.
Good answer. Often for an audience like ours, what I assume to be a fairly technical audience, the role of money doesn't often come up for engineers until you rise up quite a bit in the organization. Jaime, I'm going to ask you, what do you think the economics of 5G, how is that different? How will we as engineers have to react differently in a 5G environment? What do we need to do differently in a 5G environment?
I think at the end of the day, we just need to think on what's the value that we are going to be creating, right? What are those potentially new revenue streams, potentially new use cases? Both we have been discussing in the consumer world, in the enterprise world. Ultimately, have that in mind, right? Because I think if I can summarize all what we have been discussing today, right? There's a lot of complexity. There are a lot of unknowns. Some of our customers may be thinking, look, what can I do, right, with it? And I think telcos, in a way, we need to help also those customers that they may be thinking, what can I do with this technology? How is this going to impact my business, right? And at the end of the day, trying to help them. There is a lot to discover. This has just started, really, just 1 year. Thinking ahead of the next 5 years, there is a lot to co-create, to identify, and I think we need to always bear in mind ultimately what's going to be the impact of 5G, right? And that's how it will drive the business case, and it will drive the new value creation that is going to happen into the industry.
Interesting. Kundavachai, how about you? A short answer. What for your team, your enterprise marketing team? What do you think the single most important goal or objective should be for your team in the next little while relative to 5G?
I think it's a matter of the timing of demand and supply that can reach the equilibrium point in the near future. I would like to give one example of connected vehicle. You mentioned about autonomous vehicle, right? If we discuss about autonomous vehicle right now, I think we don't reach that point yet. But if we get back to 10 years ago, I think less than 5% of vehicle from manufacturer are connected vehicle. But right now here in Thailand, I think most of vehicles from manufacturer now are connected vehicle. And they start with very basic one like telematics and go to the advanced one, entertainment in the car, so on and so forth. So we reach the scale already for the connected vehicle. But for the more advanced 5G use cases, I think we are very early in the very early stage. The effort that we have to put is how we're going to build the demand together with the supply to reach the scale. And I believe that some verticals will reach the point faster than other verticals. For example, for automotive one, I think that would be the most potential vertical one that can reach the scale much faster. But for manufacturer, I still very curious about smart manufacturing because the verticals are very fragmented. There are a lot of use cases and they are totally different from one factory to another factory. So to reach the scale would not be easy in the manufacturing vertical. So again, my point is how we gonna reach there, and the role of telco is how we gonna build our platform, our infrastructure to serve it on the supply side and build the demand side to more aware to adopt the 5G technology into their businesses.
Interesting stuff. So I'm going to direct a question to Redwan. As Harvey mentioned, the economics of 5G are somewhat different just because of the tremendous investment that required to build out the 5G network. So, how to offset that big investment? What's the primary revenue opportunity? And I know that's a big topic. If you could pick just one or two, what do you think the primary revenue opportunities for 5G are in the near term?
Well, this is $1 million question, and especially
several million.
Perhaps $1 billion, and perhaps the timing is this is a very different time we're living in. We're in the midst of once in a century health crisis, and so far it hasn't been a good experience for 5G. All those conspiracy theories and etc. And then we know that this situation, this pandemic, will accelerate digital transformation and etc. But we're still unsure which direction it is going to take. So, and this will very much influence the economics of 5G for sure. And so right now there is no definitive answer from my side, and I'm sure for others as well. We just need to at least go through a cycle of exploration to see that what are the real use case. Nowadays we're talking about 5G in many cases. I'll be really frank that we talk about 5G for the sake of 5G. Those use cases can be supported by even Wi-Fi, 4G, and fiber. But then again, the real use case, only the real use case will drive the business case, the economics. But we are yet to find that hero 1, 2, 3 use cases. So that's my take on that.
I think it's a key point that we really lack the time to explore, but I think it's going to be very hard to have a clear view of what will be the successful use cases. It's hard to have that view, while we're still in a non-standalone environment. We'll really need to get to 5G cores to get to those use cases. We need the much wider deployment of fiber to take advantage of the capabilities of 5G. And we need an edge compute infrastructure. Those all need to be in place before we can really expand and grow into the use case opportunity for 5G. Kun Tayob, how does for cell card, is there a fiber infrastructure? How do you think fiber plays in, or is there can you get by with copper? Do you think what's fiber mean to cell card?
Actually, fiber in Cambodia is available everywhere. So for us, it's not a problem to going on fiber. Rather, we prefer to go with fiber even for 4G sites. So for example, in Phnom Penh, over 80% of the sites are connected with fiber optic. So in other words, you can see we are 5G ready in terms of transmission. We just need to change the boxes. So that's not the problem for us. Mostly the terrain in Cambodia is almost flat in some places where we have mountains. So, but that we can cover as well. So I will certainly go with the fiber optic to support 5G. So,
okay.
But the problem is, what is the use case as you were asking right now?
Yeah.
The use cases that only we can do is right now eMBB. And now we are also trying to invest something on VR and AR application and VR advertisement. So we are partnering with some of the companies that are doing this advertisement based on VR stuff. And we are also arranging esports. So we are spending money on the esport as well. So even in this quarter, we also won Best Gaming Operator Award from OpenSignal. So we are working on this because we have to keep on thinking, okay, what should be our next use cases? So that's why we are moving forward to gaming, to AR and VR stuff. And then also we are going towards smart cities so that we can apply some kind of IoT scenarios on 5G. Also, smart city can be managed, as someone said here, through 4G networks as well. But we have to keep on moving because we have to involve government. Regulator role is very crucial in this one. I can deploy 5G, but who will use the 5G? That's the main problem. The only user that we have is the mobile user. We don't have machine users right now. Machine as a user, which is the true case of 5G and the slicing. So government need to work on the industry part as well. They need to give some time frame to the industry and framework to the industry. Okay, guys, 5G is coming. We are bringing 5G. So you need to start automating your processes, and we will help it through the 5G companies. And then there will be a discussion, okay, then where to put the edge clouding, because if industry is ready or willing, if they already upgraded their infrastructure, we have no issue to place edge cloud in near their location, because edge cloud, the purpose is just to keep it closer to the user so that we can give more processing power near to their premises. But even if I deploy 5G now in Cambodia, doesn't make any difference for me whether I need edge cloud or not, because there is no application or use cases for me. I just put 5G to support eMBB requirement to offload some of the congestion on the 4G part. And people here keep on buying the 5G phones. And the other important aspect that we are looking into is enterprises. We are focusing enterprises here in the 5G. In the first scenario of 5G deployment, we will give them higher broadband speeds where they cannot have the fiber optic availability, because so much construction is going on and there is a lot of fiber cards here in Cambodia. This is the only viable option if we can give them the wirelessly, the fixed network, so which they can use.
Okay, thank you. Saad, we just have a couple of minutes remaining. A couple of closing comments from you, your observation of the session.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I just want to emphasize first the vision of 5G using open source. It's real. I just want to take this opportunity to bring to the community. We have been working during the last several months together with multiple communities to bring up a white paper that explains how you will deploy 5G using open source. This is a reality that there are gaps that we are trying to quantify and solve over time. And the other key aspect is, I think that time of telecom where we were building the houses and the keys are also with the vendors and we fight, I think that time is over only if we are more responsible. And I think this is the time of technologies and doers. So I think this is very important to make any of this. And we can only win this if we come with an open mindset and a desire to change it. So I think this is my 3 points. And anyways, I also welcome anybody who's willing to join, because now we are not just relying on vendors. You know, I am an open believer of technology changing lives. and societies. As I said, in 5G, this is a reality. We go to telco vendors, we go open source, we go hyperscalers. So we want to solve all customer issues. We go to verticals. If the hyperscaler is there, we also want to. I think this is a very important time to see that we should not only wear the 3GPP or telco hat. If we need to really make it work or really make it something which is real. So this is actually, maybe, you know, I am a bit more technical, or maybe you can say pragmatic, but this is how I want to approach it.
Okay, thanks, Saad. So we've only got just a moment left. It's been very fun discussing this with each of you. It's a frustration as well that we had so little time to, you know, we didn't spend much time on open source. We didn't have a chance to talk about network slicing. We didn't have a chance to talk about Open RAN. These are all things that are going to be rather important, I believe, to 5G over the next 5 years. And the biggest omission that we really had no time to explore is how does the skill set of a telecom engineer have to change in a 5G environment? There's so many new things that are absolutely essential, and we just had no time to get into that. Thanks a lot for listening to us. We're at the end of our hour. We hope you found this valuable. You can find us all on LinkedIn if you care to, or through the Terrapin app associated with this event. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to talking with you again soon. Bye-bye now.
Thank
you, guys.
Thank you, Russell.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.